We moved in here 3 years ago, and every so often we'd talk through the fence, and I'd go up to the porch and chat. So I've always known her as the, philosophical lady next door. Got this phone call from my husband saying, the neighbours died and it's been ages since anyone discovered her.
Loneliness has been called the epidemic of our times. 1.9 million Australians live alone, and more the elderly are dying, and no one knows they're dead.
People think the police do it. Well, the police don't. My name is Unattended, and I'm a forensic cleaner. We attend to suicides, where someone, and it's usually a young person, has taken their own life. And then we deal with crimes and murders, and we also do hoarding as well. So we see the last minutes of everyone's life. That's what I do every day. The reason I got into this business was a friend of mine committed suicide, and his parents were told to clean it up, and he had hung himself in his wardrobe and been in there 6 weeks. So there was a lot of mess. The hardest ones are the unattended deaths, because it's usually an old person. We're getting between 50 and 150 unattended deaths a year, and I think it's getting worse.
Unattended deaths are as mysterious as the lives that went before them. With no living relatives or friends, their solitary lives leave no clues about who they were. But this case would turn out differently.
Maybe that was her way of leaving, a legacy for everyone to have. I don't know.
First time I met her, I went up to her porch. She was sitting there in the sun writing and, doing her journal. And she said she was doing her memoirs.
These impressions, after a long life of nearly 90 years, are my own. Right or wrong, are real and lived through. My 10 fingers don't need any support to hold a pen, and neither does my mind need any stimulants to express itself. A last pleasure of a lonely life.
The last lot of milk that she bought was still sitting in the fridge, and it expired on the 7th of January. 6 months. Dying and decomposing into the floor with no one to even notice she's gone.
Coming home today from the shops and leaning heavily on my cane, I am wondering if old age is a blessing or a curse or purgatory. I know that I must look to others as a stupid old has-been, because I avoid most of the new and prefer the old. I am a complete ignoramus in the modern ways of life, and I don't mind.
She was born in the Czech Republic in 1924. She was fiercely intelligent and studied medicine before travelling to Egypt, where she was recommended for marriage to her husband. She worked as a bilingual translator in Morocco before the pair migrated to Australia in 1957. They never had children and lived in this house together for the best part of half a century, until his death in 2001. But there are still big gaps in what we know. It's only through thousands of pages of her immaculately handwritten diaries that we get a window into the forgotten life of a brilliant yet lonely mind.
In the quietness of old age, many unanswered questions occupy the mind with no definitive answers. Only guesses. I still don't know why I was born. I have this impression that I was just a prop, moved from place to place whenever it was needed.
Well, the last time I saw her, she was over the fence. Fence was pretty rickety, and she looked up at me and she said, when you get old, you begin to look a bit like this fence. You're missing bits and you're really tired, and things are falling apart.
These days, I feel like a half-dried rug, with all its purpose wrung out, and I feel no blessings in being alive. Feasts and celebrations go by with no string sounding a gay tune. I haven't received a single Christmas card from anyone of this generation. Not even the stray cat came for a meal. In the end, death comes as a blessing, but no one sees it that way.
It was as if she was giving you advice on how to live your life the best, because she'd lived a really, really long time. We talked about her husband and how he'd passed away and how she used to go and visit him.
2011, 10 years ago at this date, I had lost my life companion of more than half a century and became a lonely widow. He would have been 90 years of age today if he had lived that long, but his memory is still fresh in my mind. The imprint of his life and death still live with me. I have his ashes in the casket resting on the ledge of the chimney in the living room, waiting to be buried with mine. I could feel his presence when I touched the casket, but no more. His spirit is truly gone and only visits me in dreams.
She complains about the upcoming digital TV retune. She wrote that Telstra disconnected the phone because she wasn't using the specified amount of calls every month.
I wasn't getting calls from friends who are dead by now.
She wrote that her Medicare card was discontinued and she didn't know how to renew it.
What we leave behind us once we are physically gone is an aura which is impregnated into old houses and which differs from room to room. In any old house, a death must have occurred with no exception. My house has 2 bedrooms and the atmosphere in each is quite different. In either of them, for the past some 80 years, there must have been some scenes of happiness and tragic sadness.
This is the room where she's passed away in. Obviously, you can see where she was sitting at this seat, and obviously the seat's fallen, so we've got maggot activity and fly activity.
When you die alone, within 6 minutes the first fly is landing on the body to lay the maggots. Then the body starts to fill up with gases. It actually turns a greeny black and the body explodes. You're virtually left with bone.
I actually don't want this one. So that's her scalp, that's come off her head.
I don't think the smell of death is like anything. It's not a rubbish tip on a hot day. It's not a dead animal that you find a rat under your house or something. Once you've smelt it, you know it. It gets into everything. It gets into your pores, it gets into your hair, it's up your nose. I say it's an entity unto its own.
And remember, we're pretty lucky because this isn't too bad.
I feel a bit sick.
I thought you've got to get green.
I don't think anything smells like death. It's death.
Since my widowhood 10 years ago, I've been writing my meditations, filling new books with them, even destroying them after rereading them. Another year, and a new book too, in lieu of a friend. Scribbling and filling the pages might seem a waste of time, immaterial, for no one is going to decipher them. But to me, it is an exercise in thinking and evaluating, and a pleasure within itself.
Her diaries reveal much about her life, but also raise questions about her death.
Death is inevitable. For some, perhaps lucky, it comes swiftly, while the others it wavers slowly. I can feel the end of my days. It is announced by the weakening of the legs and arms with a slight tremor in them. So be it. I can feel that my time is approaching its end. I have prepared a lethal cocktail to help my demise, but I don't think that I will need it. It's still standing, untouched, on the side table.
We'll never know how she passed away. Because she had passed away such a long time and decomposed on the floor, they can't do an autopsy.
The bitterness of this unnamed woman's story is not the fact she died alone with no one to share her brilliant mind with other than some cheap exercise books. It's that her story is sadly not unique.
She left a will, and the saddest thing was that there were names crossed out because they had died before her. My first wish while still alive is to be allowed to die with dignity. She didn't die with dignity. She died alone, and she died on a cold floor with no one there.
Through one's life, the mind is burdened with a lot of trivia, like an overstuffed drawer. Then, with ageing, it throws out a lot of uselessness and retains vividly only the useful and treasured bits and truths. The schooling of the mind never ceases. We reach the old age with more questions than we asked ourselves throughout life. Many unanswered ones die with us.